Now, international reaction to the U.S. missile strike on a Syrian airbase as the world ponders the impact of the U.S. retaliation to the gruesome chemical weapons attack on civilians in Syria. Now, a Syrian watchdog says the airbase attack killed at least 4 Syrian soldiers, while Syrian officials say 6 people were killed and several were wounded. Now, the Kremlin says the U.S. action inflicted considerable damage to already, quote, lamentable U.S.-Russian ties. Russia continues to insist that Syria has no chemical weapons. The Russian Foreign Ministry says it is now calling for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council and says the Syrian air safety agreement that has been in place with the U.S. has now been officially suspended. And for more now on the U.S. retaliation against Syria and the global reaction to that, I'm joined here in Washington by VOA White House correspondent Pete Heinlein. Thank you for joining us, Pete.
You're welcome.
And from our New York studio by VOA's United Nations correspondent Margaret Besheer. Thank you both for the quick turnaround on this developing story. It's going to be a busy day for both of you, but Margaret, I'm going to start with you. What can you tell us about Russia's request for an emergency meeting? What do they want to find out?
Well, actually, Mill, it's the Bolivians, who are friends of Russia, on the council, who requested the meeting last night once the missiles started flying. They were the first to put in a request for an emergency meeting. The council will meet here at about 11:30 in about 1 hour. We're going to hear a briefing from the UN political chief, Jeffrey Feltman. I think council members want to hear answers. They want to know whether this is a new U.S. policy on Syria or whether this is a one-off. We had some positive words. The British Defense Ministry called this a limited and appropriate reaction. The French and the Germans issued a joint statement. They said that Assad's crimes cannot go unpunished. So we've had some positive reaction. The Canadians also very positive, saying they fully support a limited strike. But then you have the Russians, who are furious. The Kremlin has said that our relations already are in a poor state and this will only hurt them further. Last night, there were meetings here late into the evening, and the Russian deputy ambassador told us that if there was to be unilateral military action by the Americans, there would be negative consequences, and that those consequences would fall firmly on the shoulders of those who initiated the military action.
Margaret,
so the Russians very concerned about this.
Margaret, I'm curious, was the UN Security Council warned ahead of time about the U.S. action, or did it come as a surprise?
Well, I can't say for sure. I know that some members of the council, some of our allies, did say that they received warning. I believe the Germans said that the Germans and the French, I believe, said in their statement they knew about it. I would assume the British knew about it as well. Okay. But I, don't know in terms of China and Russia. Right. I think there have been some mixed reports on whether the Russians knew.
Thanks,
Certainly,
Margaret.
I don't think they told the Chinese. They're not there. They don't need to.
Right. So, Pete, let me get you into this conversation. This missile strike obviously represents a big change of heart for the Trump administration, which, as early as last week, was saying Syria or Bashar al-Assad is not a very high priority for us. What changed?
Well, I think that it's an evolution. The Trump administration foreign policy is just coming into focus. On the other hand, I think there is a certain logic to what they're saying. You can see that a week ago, what they were saying is, we're not interested in overthrowing Assad. That doesn't mean that they accept him as the legitimate leader of Syria. But then, when this happens, it changes the calculation completely.
It changes everything completely.
It turns him into a real pariah in the neighborhood, and it gives President Trump the opportunity he probably needed to show that he's not the same as his predecessor.
Yeah, it's obviously a big contrast, his reaction, the swift reaction to this, versus the previous administration, which sort of hemmed and hawed after pointing out that this is a red line that you don't cross.
He wants to send a signal, and he's been looking for a way to send a signal. And if this hadn't happened, something else would come along that gives him the opportunity to show that the United States policy toward this type of activity, wherever it occurs, is going to be a lot different, and he's going to be much more aggressive.
Margaret, getting back to you, we know Saudi Arabia, we know Turkey and Israel have welcomed this action. What does Iran have to say about this?
Well, the Iranian foreign minister was on Twitter a couple hours ago saying that, strongly condemning the chemical weapons, condemning the strike and saying that Iran has been a victim of chemical weapons in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War. Saddam Hussein used them on Iran. And so he was strongly condemning the United States, though, for its strike. They're seeing it as aggression. And, look, Iran is Assad's biggest ally in the region. It's not good for them if he's weakened. They need him there. So, of course, they're not going to be comfortable with this. And, of course, there's an implicit message to Iran and to North Korea and to other, rogue countries that don't do this, or you could be next.
Pete, in an interesting political twist, the Trump administration, which has been badgered since January 20th with allegations of Russian collusion, does this put that whole issue to rest? What do you anticipate will happen? Is this going to give Trump cover to say that, see, I'm not working with the Russians?
I think this, again, plays right into Mr. Trump's hands. He has been denying this and at the same time has appeared to be moving closer to President Putin and the Russians. These collusion charges were a real irritant. And suddenly they're a sideshow. They're gone because now he's showing that has a new, tougher attitude toward Russia, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of that.
The image that is so far we've heard from the media regarding this president who's not been able to accomplish much outside of executive orders since January 20th.
That's right. And one can question whether those charges had any validity at all. But now he has a chance to show once and for all that he is going to be a tough guy.
Margaret, what actions, if any, can we expect from the UN Security Council in the coming days? Do you anticipate things will ratchet up where you are in New York?
Well, look, there were really contentious negotiations yesterday over three different variations on the same theme of a draft resolution condemning the gas attack on Tuesday in Syria. That's all sort of in limbo right now. Who knows if there'll be a resolution after this unilateral action. I think council members really just want to know what the United States' position is now. They hope to hear from Nikki Haley, I'm assuming, this morning. They want to get some reassurance about where this is all going. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what we're looking for in New York today.
Yeah, Nikki Haley, sort of U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley actually foreshadowed this, didn't she, when she spoke to the UN Security Council, didn't she?
Yeah, she said this week that if the collective, UN doesn't do anything about Syria, some countries may have to think about going it alone.
And
she
that's
did
exactly
sort of
what they did.
A little warning.
Right, and that's exactly what they did on Thursday. Keep us posted.
And people were very nervous here last night.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
They were, council members were nervous. They were worried something was going to happen.
As were a lot of people around the world. Margaret Besheer, thank you for keeping us posted. Pete Heinlein, thank you, but stick around. We're going to need you. Time now for another quick break. But when we come back, all of this news from Syria definitely has overshadowed a significant meeting that's happening in Florida right now between Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. We'll talk about that next. But first, a reminder, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, and comments on our Facebook page. The address is VOA The Correspondents. We'll be right back.